Okay. Well, we've got more people trickling in right now, but in the interest of getting started on time and respecting everybody's time, I think we should go ahead and get started. And once again, I want to welcome everybody to our webinar, our Yash Technology and Microsoft co-sponsored webinar, Think SAP on Azure and Beyond. My name is Jeff Kaznika, and I'm going to be the moderator and the host. And we are going to take you through about 45 minutes worth of content talking about the advantages and the partnership that Microsoft, Yash, and SAP have put together as you're thinking about your digital transformation and looking potentially to the cloud to migrate your SAP workloads. So let's go ahead and get started. First, just a little bit about Yash. Next slide, please. So Yash is a global organization that is over 25 years old. We have 6,500 employees that are very highly engaged and talented employees. We have 50 virtual technology and business centers of excellence around the globe. We have a global headquarters in East Moline, Illinois, and we are one of the largest SAP service providers globally, as well as being a global Microsoft partner. As it relates to our Microsoft capabilities, we have over 18 years experience in doing a variety of Microsoft infrastructure, modern workplace, business application, data and AI services. We have over 300 projects under our belt. We have 700 plus consultants, and we are a cloud service provider. And you can see we are in a number of different industries, and we are a full service Microsoft provider, providing everything from advisory and consulting services all the way through migration, training, and adoption. So in short, we are very happy to be working closely with Microsoft on this. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our main speaker today, who's literally wrote the book on SAP to Azure migrations. His name is Ravi Kashyap. And Ravi, over to you.
Thanks, Jeff, for that introduction. And I'm glad to be contributing to the community with my book. It's an SAP, it's published by SAP Press that was released last year. And the book title is, as you may guess, SAP on Microsoft Azure. Thank you. So to get started here, I would like to start with what we are seeing everywhere, right? I know when SAP on cloud started, there was a lot of focus on cost and prices and how do we lower cost, how do we lower TCO. But a couple of years later now, we are seeing much wider use cases. So like I was working with a company that was splitting themselves, or they were selling some of their warehouses and splitting into a different company. And they wanted something to be spun up quickly, so they could give it to the other company, do the data, migrate their BW systems to the new subscription, do the data shredding, and make sure whatever the right data is given to the company. So all of this needed to be done in just a couple of months. And if you think about traditional data center environment, if you're trying to do something like this, move all the SAP systems, shred the data, try to split off companies, that can be very, very different or very complicated in that sense. So I think cloud environments play a bigger role in that. It brings lower TCO, higher agility in that sense, and then make sure you are faster to market in that sense. But besides that, the use cases are widening in terms of data also. Once you have your SAP systems in Azure, what do you do with all the data or all the BW systems? And in that sense, we look at the cloud as not only in terms of data hosting, but what can you do in terms of your business agility? And once you are in the cloud, how do you make use of the data for insights? So those are the big use cases that we are seeing these days. In terms of how many customers run SAP on Azure or what industries, you can see we have all the big and big logos out here for each and every industry. So every once in a while I hear, how does it fit in my industry, or how does it fit in for a particular use case? And you can see Azure caters to almost all the industries and all use cases. One of the biggest examples that I like to talk about is SAP itself. So SAP runs their SAP systems in Azure, and Microsoft runs their SAP systems in Azure, of course, right? So Microsoft has a big SAP landscape, so we understand how SAP works, you understand how architecture works, and there are a lot of learnings from that gets implemented to Azure. So there's no surprise that not only SAP's IaaS systems, but a lot of software as a service systems are reside in Azure as well. When you talk about why SAP on Azure, I want to highlight bigger use case, like in terms of thinking bigger. If we think about SAP solutions on Azure, let's talk about a parallel of buying a house. So like, I'm sure everybody owns a house here. If not, you have looked at houses. So if you try to buy a house, when I was buying a house a couple of years ago, I was looking at the interiors first, meaning where's the kitchen, how is the floor plan, where's the location. But in back of my mind, there were other factors as well, such as what kind of community is it? Do they have a swimming pool? What's the school district there? So to parallel that in the cloud world, SAP on Azure is kind of interior of the house. Where's the kitchen? What's the floor plan? What does the VM queue look like? But if you expand that to the community, meaning where's the swimming pool? What are the school districts? Microsoft has other tools and technologies that makes it bigger and better. And this slide shows some of the examples like Microsoft 365, LinkedIn. GitHub is one of the largest open source tools that is used by developers worldwide. Microsoft Power Platform that enables developers themselves to create their own workflow with low code or no code technology. And all of this is being integrated with SAP solutions in Azure. So bigger picture wise, just don't think of Azure as just what VM queues or what network is available, but what the ecosystem that you're moving into. Once you are in Azure, you have the bigger ecosystem that relies on a lot of other technologies that's backed by security and identity management of Azure. So to highlight why SAP in Azure, I want to talk about three things here. First thing is the cloud platform, what it brings, what the scalability is. Number two is security. Number three, what innovations you can bring once you're on Azure. And then I'll talk a little bit about the partnership between Microsoft and SAP. So in terms of the cloud platform for SAP, Microsoft has more than 60 regions now. And if you've been following the announcement, Microsoft is going to make sure each and every country has availability zones now. So in terms of number of regions, we are the biggest cloud platform, biggest public cloud platform with more regions than any other cloud provider. In terms of workload sizing, we start, of course, from lower sizes for general purpose or SAP application servers, but on the higher end also, Azure has more than 110 VM SKUs, VM and large instance or bare metal SKUs certified for HANA. So if you look at SAP hardware metrics, that's for IaaS for SAP, you can see as of now we have more than 110 VMs, not VM, 110 SKUs that include both virtual machines and HANA large instances, which is the bare metal. It goes from as small as a couple of 100 gigs to VM goes up to 12 terabyte and large SKUs goes up to 24 terabyte. Azure is only public cloud platform that has certified offering for Intel Optane technology as well. So if you have heard about how Intel Optane works and shrinks the memory size by introducing the PMM technology, and we have SKUs, HANA large instance SKUs available in our cloud platform. When you move SAP to Azure, there's or to a cloud platform, there's a thought to use cloud native technologies. And I've seen that a lot these days. When you're already on the cloud, why use different technologies and kind of mesh it together? What are the available native technologies? So in that area, Microsoft has certain tools that we have developed out of our experience ourselves, like running SAP systems ourselves, but also from the customer feedback. A couple of things that I wanted to highlight here is Azure Monitor for SAP. So Azure Monitor is a platform as a service offering from Azure that that not only integrates with the virtual machine, but also SAP systems. So there is a SAP NetWeaver offering and SAP HANA offering. So in sense, you are monitoring everything in the same place, not only from infrastructure layer to the SAP layer also. In terms of automation templates, we have, of course, have ARM templates, Azure Resource Manager, but we noticed that a lot of customers like Terraform and Ansible scripts. So of course, since we are so customer focused, Microsoft has developed Terraform and Ansible scripts for deploying SAP HANA or SAP S/4HANA. And those are publicly available on our GitHub repos. And we can share that GitHub repo with you all. So you can just not only take what we have done, but also improve upon it and contribute to the open source community. Some other things to highlight is SAP HANA Backup. SAP Backup for HANA has been available for a couple of years now, and we are adding more capabilities to it. In terms of native technology, that's only available with Microsoft. Since Microsoft is a product company, we have our own Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, and the integration with Active Directory is something that only Microsoft provides out of the box. Next thing I want to talk about is the security and compliance. And you may have heard this a million times. I know I have, and it's so ingrained in my mind that Microsoft spends more than $1 billion every year on the cybersecurity investment. I don't know a whole lot of other companies that do this kind of investment. So we always like to think that whoever, now if you are a company that's trying to looking at the secure environment, do you have that kind of investment? If not, then of course Azure would be a better platform, because we have that kind of investment not only for a particular customer, but for overall in general, because we run our SAP systems and we run other cloud platforms, other Microsoft 365 or LinkedIn, which kind of creates our bigger defense operations. Talking about Azure Active Directory, like I had mentioned, that's a first-party product because Microsoft has developed Active Directory. Azure has the only native integration and multi-factor integrations with Azure Active Directory. And as you can see on the screen, we have more than 425 billion monthly active users. I want to talk a little bit about cloud-based security approach in the context of SAP. So if it's security starts with identity. So identity and access is a big part of security, right? Making sure who you say you are, and you have the right access to access the resources that you're trying to access. So in that sense, we have identity and access, app and data security, even threat protection. So Azure Sentinel is a new product that that does the enterprise threat protection, and there is a SAP connector there. So there's something called Azure Sentinel for SAP. So now you can connect all your SAP system. It will collect all the data and analyze it using our AI models and kind of tell you where the threat protection and prevents it through the threat protection too. Azure has our own security center. So all of this is to say that the $1 billion that we say we are investing is focused through all the wide variety of houses in that sense, like right from identity management to the app security through the threat protection and security management. Compliance wise, Azure is compliant for almost everything that you can think of, right from ISO to NIST to ITAR. This screen shows some of the certification that we have, but in general, Azure has more than 90 compliance certification, which is bigger than any other public cloud provider. Third thing that I want to talk about is insights and innovation. And in my mind, this is very big, because moving to a cloud platform is consistent experience across the board, right? No matter which cloud platform you choose, you may have certain certified VMs, certain certified storage, but once you move your data there, what happens then? What can you do with it? What are you going to do in 5 years, 10 years? How can you bring insights to your business? So the way I look at it is, once you are once your SAP estate is in Azure or a cloud platform, what do you do with the data now? how do you play with other native apps, and what other technologies, cloud technologies, can you use to bring access to not only in terms of SAP, but to your business? So this slide talks a little bit about some of the technologies and tools that we have in terms of SAP Synapse, Azure Synapse. So what does Azure Synapse and do in terms of analytics, and how does it connect to SAP HANA? So there's an Azure HANA connector for Synapse where you can push your data to Azure Synapse, transform it, and then do the reporting on top of that. So that's something that's done by a lot of customers these days, and it's on the focus for a lot of companies that are trying to create a data warehouse, data lake kind of thing, to reduce or to take advantage of data in that sense, to unlock the value. Microsoft has some other products in Azure services too, like data lake storage and Power BI. But that's just the initial part of it. If you get a little bit bigger from there, SAP Cloud Platform Connector or Microsoft GitHub, all this connectivity exist in Azure out of the box. So the message that I'm trying to say here is, if you think of a cloud platform, think of the bigger picture in the sense, yes, SAP, is it the right platform for the SAP? Yes. But what do we do then? What happens once you move your Azure data to a cloud platform? And in that sense, Azure has a lot of services and products that integrate with SAP system that can take advantage of your data. Do we have any questions so far, Jeff, that we can take?
None so far. Please, yeah, that's a good point. There is if you're not familiar with Zoom, there's a Q&A button down at the bottom that you can click on. So if you do have questions, please enter them in there and we will bring those up, and we'll see if we get those here shortly.
Thank you. So this is an example that I wanted to show on how does not only SAP data, but other data kind of integrates and goes into Azure, where you can build your Azure machine learning model and do reporting on. So as this one says, SAP data is a part of your data estate. Right? You may have some non-SAP data, other cloud providers data, or SaaS products. Now, if you, as a business, you're looking to do a combined reporting, this could be very complex. Right? And the building a connector for each and every data transformation can be a very difficult task. And if you have tried to do it in past, you know how complex it can get. So the focus in cloud platform, or specifically in Azure, is to make sure not only we think of SAP data in the context of SAP, but take a look at the bigger picture and whole data estate. So like, how we say SAP estate. So think of data estate, what other data exists, and how can we bring that in a cloud platform or Azure cloud platform specifically, and do a reporting on top of that. So this slide shows an example of how all of data can be put in Azure Data Lake Storage using the Azure Data Factory connector. You can use Azure Databricks or Synapse Analytics on top of that, that integrates with Azure Machine Learning and Power BI. And this is a use case that I personally am very excited about, because I've been a SAP basis person for a while now. And now when you think about the new technologies, the new advancements that are happening in terms of reporting, this is the exciting part. And this is I think using cloud native technologies to do this kind of reportings does add a lot of business value. Technology is one piece of it, but how do we extract business value out of it is the better part of all of this. So Azure, since we are so much focused on customer use cases, we also have third-party technologies, right? So, and we understand that using a particular tool set or using a particular service may not be right for you. But if you have already been using something like Click, or I think it was formerly called Attunity. So if you already are familiar with certain tools and technology in marketplace, you can bring that tool and do exactly the same thing. So this example shows how you can bring your SAP ECC data, or any S/4HANA data for that matter, using a Click connector to Azure Synapse Analytics, same use case, different tools. So that shows the openness of Azure Cloud Platform in the context of, if you already are using something, just bring that here. And that goes on to highlight what our CEO Satya always says: we meet our customers where you are. So wherever you are in the journey of moving SAP to Azure or moving your data estate to Azure, if you're familiar with certain tools and technologies, that of course, that's like in the of course category, right? It's of course it's supported on Azure. Some of the other things that come from using cloud native technologies, and that's we have seen a lot of good use cases, are using Power Platform. Power Platform is Microsoft's low-code, no-code technology that puts the control back into developers' hand. So traditionally, if you were to create a report, you go to your IT people and they'll create a report, you work with them, there's a certain workflow. It takes a while to kind of perfect that workflow. And then by the time it does, the report does perfected, it needs something else. And then the whole cycle starts. So this Power Platform puts that control right to the developers or to the end user. So like, for example, I'm not big into coding. So if I were to develop a report, I'll have to work with somebody. Versus if I'm trying to use the Power Platform or Power Automate, I can do a lot of these things myself without having to go through a coding class or coding boot camp. I don't even remember when was the last time I did coding, maybe when I was in college, right? So, and a tool like this can be very powerful. So you don't have to go learn coding to begin with. Plus, in terms of control, you can control what the output is, what connectors you are looking to utilize. How do you create the workflow and the final reporting in the context of SAP? Of course, there are SAP connectors that you can extract the data from. In terms of use cases, I always like to talk about customer stories, because it's one thing to say that you can do this or you can do that, but how have you done it or who has done it? So this is my favorite example from Daimler. They started moving their systems to Azure, SAP systems to Azure. And from there, they wanted to build faster or like create, like we were talking about the data estate. They wanted to make sure they're utilizing the native technologies and making business decisions. So technical decision is one thing, but how do you utilize that through the business and drive innovation in your business? So they use a lot of open source technologies and they combine that with our Azure native tools. And as you can see, the business value here that they have driven. So in terms of 3 things to remember, why SAP on Azure? Number 1 is cloud platform. Number 2 is security. Number 3 is insights and innovation, which is what do you do once you're in Azure. So I wanted to highlight that because that's the main takeaway here. Oh, if you don't remember anything else, remember what are you going to do once the data is on Azure. Right. I want to talk a little bit about our partnership here. When I say partnership, it's the partnership between Microsoft and SAP. Microsoft and SAP have been partnered for more than 25 years. Like we had mentioned in the beginning of our, Jeff, do you have a question? I heard some noise.
Yeah, well, there are a couple of questions. I was going to let you finish, but if you'd like to, we could touch on a couple of the questions that have come across now.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so one question came through, what automations are available for SAP workloads? And then they provided some examples: installation of S/4HANA, high availability setup, system refresh. Or could you talk to that a little bit?
Yes.
And then, well, as a follow-up to that, are those predefined, or do the customer need to customize them per requirements? And does Azure provide both those options?
So yes to all. So we started with our ARM template deployments. ARM is Azure Resource Manager. But along the way, we discovered that customers like Terraform and Ansible, which is not Azure technology, but in the bigger context of meeting the customers where they are, using the tools and technologies that they like, Microsoft has developed Azure and Terraform and Ansible templates to deploy S/4HANA or just HANA. That's available on our GitHub also. So the GitHub template kind of has all the code that showcases the use case and how to deploy it. But that's not all. If you wanted to deploy it for your environment or customize it for yourself, it's an open source availability. So you can just go and download or sync that repository, customize it for yourself, and then develop it and build or add more features to it and create a pull request so everybody else can use it too. So
Yeah,
not
so
only that, I think the couple of weeks ago, we released our Terraform provider it's still in the private preview, and we can send a link after this webinar too. Microsoft is piloting a program wherein it would be more like a BOM, bill of material based deployment. You know what kind of systems you want, you know what the storage looks like. So why go and choose your code yourself, right? Why go and mess with the code? Just give me the BOM and tell me what to do. So it's that kind of model. And with the private preview, we are hoping to take our automation to the next level, wherein you don't have to worry about complexities of what does this need? Does this VM need accelerated networking, for example? Yes, of course it does. And you don't have to worry about that. What kind of storage it needs. You just need to tell me what kind of SAP system you're trying to install, what version, and then Azure will go provision it.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely some important things to remember. So really either way, whether you want to customize or if you leverage it predefined, Microsoft can help you.
Yeah, and all of this is available with Terraform and Ansible. So if you're already familiar with other groups of your company is already working on these technologies, you don't have to go change or learn a new different technology.
Yeah. Okay. Great answer. Thanks. A couple more. There was a question about Azure Monitor. I know you covered it a little bit, but providing a little bit more details around what Azure Monitor for SAP HANA is.
So while working with customers, the use case here is people wanted to see something consolidated. So traditionally, in a traditional environment, there is an OS team or infrastructure team that does their monitoring. There is an SAP team that does their monitoring with solution manager. So there's a little bit silo here. And then there's some overlap. For example, solution manager can do OS monitoring or file system monitoring, but there's no good way to integrate that in a simple or single pane of glass in that sense. So our motivation here was to make sure we marry the infrastructure and application layer information and show a dashboard. So for example, you are the SAP manager or an infrastructure manager, you wake up every day, you want a dashboard. No, you have a big screen in your office, you want a dashboard that says what happened in our last 24 hours for all our SAP system. By the way, I'm not talking about infrastructure. Is the SAP availability, or was SAP system down, or something happened? So Azure Monitor does that by integrating application layer insights into the virtual machine or infrastructure layer insight. Azure calls it provider. So there's a SAP provider, there's an Azure provider for SAP HANA, there's a provider for SAP NetWeaver, which is ABAP or Java Stack. There's a provider for OS too. Like, for example, we use open source technologies such as Prometheus. If you are in an open source world, and if you have been using SUSE Linux, you know what Prometheus is. Using that open source technology, we have integrated in Azure Monitor for SAP that will let you monitor the high availability. And there's no good tool as a base. I used to be a basis person. As a basis person, I never found a good tool to monitor SAP high availability, as in everything is configured right. Whenever it fails over, it didn't generate an alert or a service ticket. So what Azure Monitor has done is combined few different tools and technology, gives you a dashboard of what's running, what has happened in past. You can drill down. And then if you identify a problem, narrow it down. How many times have you seen people finger pointing, right? This is an infrastructure problem. This is an SAP problem. And now nobody knows where the problem is. So that's the bigger context of what SAP Monitor for Azure is trying to solve for our customers. And to that extent, it's just addition of VM infrastructure, marrying of infrastructure and SAP. So I know,
Sure.
long answer to your short question, but it's not restricted to SAP HANA itself. We have developed it further to include the application layer, ABAP or Java, and the OS layer.
And we're happy to follow up with the person that asked that question if they need further details, but I think that does a pretty good job of summarizing the highlights. So thanks for that. Another question that came through, are all the high memory instances available on demand or only available on reservation?
Specifically for HANA?
Doesn't
Yeah,
say
okay. So, okay, all right. So, well, high memory, whenever I think of high memory, first thing that comes to my mind is HANA. And if you are in SAP space, that's the first thing that comes to your mind too, obviously. So, in terms of reservation versus pay as you go, as Azure calls it, which is immediate availability, all the virtual machines, right, from 125 gig to 12 terabyte, as big as 12 terabyte, is available on demand. What it means is you go to Azure portal, click a button, and you can provision a 12 terabyte box. The HANA large instances are the bare metal SKUs, which is also called S series. Like all the virtual machines go up to M series. If you're looking at 12 terabyte virtual machine, that would be M series machines. If you're looking at anything above that, at the moment is only available in the bare metal format or HANA large instance, which is S series. And those require a heads up or working with Microsoft to provision those. Those are custom built machines, so it's not available right out of the box. And that's not the right word, I guess. It's not available on demand, in the sense that since we provision that, we have Microsoft provisions that for that customer or for you. So if you need a 24 terabyte machine, it will provision it for you because it's a bare metal offering, and then you get the best and brightest of whatever it has to offer. So that takes a couple of weeks of heads up, a little bit of planning, a little bit working with Microsoft, but up to 12 terabyte is on demand.
fantastic. And I do not see any other questions right now. So maybe we could go into a little bit more detail on the SAP Microsoft Partnership.
Yep, yeah, we are the last leg here. So I wanted to highlight a couple of things here. In terms of partnership, not only we work together to solve our customer problems, but we work together to solve our own problems too. Like we had highlighted earlier, SAP runs their systems in Azure and Microsoft runs their SAP systems in Azure. So what we see from this adoption is new kind of problems that you are thinking about or you have experienced. There's a good chance that either Microsoft or SAP have experienced that already. In my role, when I work with customers and they say they need this kind of feature or this is something what we are looking at, and when I go back to product team saying, yes, of course, this is already in development because we have seen it internally. So that's the value of the partnership or Microsoft running SAP systems internally. A lot of features that you see going forward or a lot of things that you see in the roadmap is based on what we have already experienced. What I want to highlight here in this screen is joint engineering roadmap. And what I mean by that is integration of the product. So we have the roadmap to improve not only the product features, but user experience. And the latest thing that comes to my mind is if you're using SAP SuccessFactors and you're trying to take a training, we are working together to do a Microsoft Teams integration in there. So you can take the training or you can talk to the cohort or the group if in SuccessFactors using Teams. So you don't have to leave the whole screen and go click, do 5 different clicks there, here and here, and go to the screen. So it's out of the box integration that works, that gives you the user experience, better user experience of taking a training or working in SuccessFactors for something else. There's a similar roadmap for SAP Business One, wherein if you're working with your vendors or working with different companies in there, and you need to get on a call with a right? So then in a traditional environment, you'll look at the SAP data, try to make notes, call the vendor, get on a call, make notes there, talk what happened, and then put the entry back in SAP. So what it means is in terms of workflow, it's a little bit disconnected. You're using different technologies, of course, but you're using different technologies in the different context, right? There's a lot of switching happening. You're in SAP screen, you're in whatever call technology you're gonna use, and there's a lot of data transfer back and forth. So as a joint engineering roadmap, we are trying to solve that by integrating Teams, again, Microsoft Teams, in the SAP environment, wherein if you have to talk to a vendor, you set up a Teams call with the vendor, they get the invite, and all of this is happening inside SAP, by the way. You get in a call, you make notes of the call, all the data that you talked about, all the notes get saved in SAP, and at the end of it, you have better experience and you're never left SAP screen. So that's the kind of, in summary, that's the kind of engineering roadmap you're talking about. All the features and the products roadmap that we talk about is based on our experience, and none of the other cloud providers have that kind of combined partnership, engineering roadmap, and unified support.
We did get one question from George that I wanted to make sure we addressed before we adjourn, and it's kind of a complex question. At what cost are these features in Azure? So I know that there are a lot of different SKUs associated with this, but can you give a general answer to that specific question around cost? I know that's easier said than done.
I know. So is that in the context of Azure native technologies, or is the VM, does it have more detail? What is? No,
there isn't. I think just kind of
good.
Maybe speak to how it's licensed and that sort of thing, and the VMs and what have you, if there's any sort of detail on that.
So yeah, there are different cost models, and then I can take bigger categories. For example, infrastructure as a service, IaaS, which is virtual machine, storage mainly, VM and storage, that are available in two different models. One is pay as you go, which is you pay for whatever you're using. You need a box for one day, just go create it using automation, and a day later you don't need it, just shut it down and you don't pay for it. So it's pay as you go, as in you can pay, I think you can pay by minute now.
Yep.
Or maybe by second. So
you can turn down and throttle down the throughput and the times and the workload. So, I mean, George, I think the bigger question, is just doing kind of a cost analysis, sort of an exercise in terms of your specific environment and adding in the pieces. And we can provide a cost analysis, if you can provide your server workloads and what have you, that might, and just have it's more of a conversation as to your specific scenarios. So happy to take that up with you offline and send you some data on how to best get that for your specific environment. Yeah,
sure. I wanted to touch on two more things quickly.
Okay, sure.
Besides pay and you go, Azure provides reservations similar to other cloud providers, wherein you commit to a usage. For SAP environments, you're not going to get rid of any sooner, right? So if you're using that for a decade or something, why use pay as you go model? You can commit, you can have a 3 years or 1 year commitment, and that drops the prices significantly. I think the discount goes up to 72%.
Absolutely, yeah.
Since going back to Microsoft is a product company, so if we use Microsoft licenses for something else, if you have Windows Server, for example, or even for Linux these days, there's something called Azure Hybrid Benefit, wherein if you're already paying for Windows Server on premises, you can bring your own license to Azure, and it's further discounted. Right? So you're getting best of both the worlds. You're using cloud platform, you're using your own licenses that you already have.
Yep, that's called hybrid use benefits, and that's something that we can talk to you about in more detail and provide some documentation to see if you have that particular benefit associated with your current agreement with Microsoft.
Yep, and Azure recently introduced hybrid benefits for Linux systems also.
Did not know that. That's actually pretty exciting, because it's amazing how much Linux actually runs on Azure.
Oh yeah, I think the other day I was talking to somebody, and 3 biggest operating systems in Azure is Red Hat, SUSE, and Windows. So
yep, just something to keep in mind. Yeah.
So open source is big platform, or big part of Azure platform.
Awesome. Okay, so I think we will be getting back to George with more details, but other than that, there are no other questions that are there. So anything else you want to cover before we kind of close up and talk about actions and next steps? Ravi?
Yeah, sure. So when you're looking at, if you are new to SAP on Azure or new to a cloud technology, what I like to do is, what kind of documentation is available for that platform, right? Or what kind of training is available for that platform, or what the company is doing. So as Microsoft, we have our own folks available too who can work with you. And also there's a lot of documentation, a lot of videos, lot of training materials available. So as a basic, I used to be a basis person and always think from that hat. If I'm an infrastructure, even with the infrastructure person, if I try to learn a new technology or a new cloud platform, you want to go where the most documentation or most training is available, because infrastructure cost is one thing, but the personal cost or the cost of learning the technology and maturing is a big cost that sometimes skips our mind. So if you're trying to get 100 people on board with learning a new technology, you want to pick a platform where there's a lot of documentation and a lot of training available.
Yep. People, process, technology, all three have to work together to make things successful.
Exactly.
All right, fantastic. Well, Ravi, we really appreciate it. Do you want to talk about your book one more time before we kind of wrap up here?
Sure. So it's called SAP on Microsoft Azure. It's an SAP Press publication, which is the official publisher of SAP. And for listeners of our webinar here, we have a 15% discount if you buy today or tomorrow too.
Absolutely, yeah. Something to consider if you're really thinking about this, getting into the details, because it is always about the details in your specific environment to make the migration successful and cost effective.
Yep, and the discount code is MAAA15. M as in Microsoft, A as in Apple. Well, I guess there's too many apples. And number 15, so that's 15% discount code available for our listeners.
Yeah, and we will send that link out in our thank you that we'll send to everybody at the end of our webinar.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, wonderful. Thank you very much for your time and attention. In terms of next steps, if you can go on to the next slide, I think they got another slide in there. We are going to be doing a lot of these. The team at Yash is very dedicated to providing our customers with as much education as possible, as all of them are going about their cloud or digital transformation journey. And we are going to be delivering, this was really the why, and that's why we're so glad that Ravi was able to join us, because you hear it straight from Microsoft in terms of why their technology is superior to migrate your SAP workloads to. And we're going to be getting into the how over the next couple of months. These are some of the different subject matters that we're going to cover in our SAP on Azure series. We're going to have our great SAP and Microsoft team that are going to be delivering those. We don't have specific dates for them yet, but they are going to be coming up soon. So please attend when they come out, and we'll be communicating with each of you. We really do hope that you found this valuable. And if you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear it. In terms of next steps, any organization interested in learning more about migrating SAP or other workloads to Azure, please reach out to me, Jeff Kaznika. My information is provided there, my cell phone and my email address, and we are happy to schedule a follow-up consultation to talk about your specific scenarios with a Yash SAP to Azure subject matter expert. And be on the lookout for more exciting offers, workshops, and what have you. We want to be your SAP on Azure organization, as well as your trusted partner in technology services. So we thank everybody else for joining, and we appreciate your time, and we'll go ahead and put this webinar to an end, unless anybody from the team from Yash has anything else to say. Going once, going twice. Okay, thanks everybody for joining. We really appreciate it, and we will be in touch. And once again, thank you to Robbie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.